Good evening, colleagues. How are you? Ho, 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 and all that. The first speech, as you've gathered, is entitled Burning Myopia, and you'll soon discover why. Ladies and gentlemen, on the 15th of November 2019, I took Aer Lingus flight EI0631 from Brussels Airport Zaventem to Craic Ado Airport Valja Clia, Dublin Airport's Terminal 2. I left Brussels at 10:15 that morning. The flight's duration was 1 hour 50 minutes, landing me in Dublin Airport at approximately 11 a.m. I bounced off the plane, I ran through the airport and through passport check. You'll be aware that Ireland is not in the Schengen zone, so we have to endure passport checks when we arrive into the country from the continent. I jumped into a taxi and I spent about 25 minutes in that taxi. It brought me to number 19 Hume Street, Dublin to Éire, Ireland, Europe, the Northern Hemisphere, planet Earth, the Milky Way, the universe. I arrived at a laser eye surgery clinic. I entered the clinic and I was greeted by an amiable young receptionist named Noreen. It's not every day that you meet a young person in Ireland named Noreen, but that's neither here nor there, really, I guess. I remember these little details, just like I remember the little details of my first day at school. When you're filled with fear, unease, and discomfort, it tends to etch itself into your memory somewhat. Much to my delight, the amiable receptionist Noreen gave me a rather large Valium, which I almost immediately self-administered. And I have to say, this was a good distraction because I'd never taken a Valium before, and a part of my mind was genuinely curious as to what effect it would have on me. I don't recall the effect, to be honest, but I do recall being distracted, and that was pleasant and welcomed. After a brief period in the waiting room, I was called in to have a consultation with the ophthalmologist. I had already had a consultation a number of months prior with the optometrist in a different city. The ophthalmologist explained the procedure to me. He said that my eyeballs were essentially too big, and this was causing light to focus in the front of my retinas, thus blurring my vision. He explained to me that he was going to cut a flap in my cornea and that he was going to use a laser to reshape my cornea. This was to correct the refraction problems that my eyes were experiencing. It's curious in these moments in life because this man was explaining all these different procedures to me, but I'd already researched these procedures in detail, perhaps too much detail, and maybe that's why I was so afraid. What I was doing in that consultation was not listening to the details of the procedure. I was rather doing what we all do in moments like this. I was trying to suss the man out. I was trying, to the best of my ability to measure, to see whether or not I could trust this man with my vision. Essentially, could I place the future of my eyes in this man's hands? After speaking to the man for quite some time, I was content. I was happy. I was content with his competence. He seemed seasoned in his craft, and I felt quite relieved. It's another curious thing that I had to have that procedure in Dublin or in Ireland. Didn't really matter where. This was November 2019, pre-COVID. I looked at my calendar today, and in the few weeks leading up to and after the procedure, I was in Brussels, I was in Rome, The Hague, Zagreb, and I was in Helsinki twice, leaving a disgraceful carbon footprint behind me, but that's a story for another day. I could have easily arranged to have the procedure in any one of these cities, but admittedly, I was scared and I craved the familiar. The ophthalmologist led me to the operating theatre and placed me in his sacred chair. He dropped a number of eye drops into my eye, which numbed my eyes, thankfully. And then he used an instrument similar to a forceps to open my left eye and keep it open, because obviously you do not want your eyelid closing down during the operation. And he covered my right eye. He then proceeded to cut a little flap in my cornea, at which point he turned on the laser machine, which emitted a raucous noise that I still remember vividly. The man then placed the laser onto my eye, at which point I was temporarily blinded. That's not a very comfortable thing to experience, I'll be honest. And I had to focus on a light during the procedure. I remember that very well. I could just barely make out a red dot in the distance, but I could see nothing else, absolutely nothing else. Another weird moment occurred at that point, because I was immediately transported back to my childhood. I would like to think that you all had a similar enough childhood to mine, and that you were quite dangerous in how you played with your siblings or your friends or your cousins or whatever. We used to play sometimes with lighters and aerosols. And amid the cacophony of shrieks and screams, you'd often have your nostrils almost assaulted by a pungent stench of singed hair. And that's what I smelled that day on that chair. And I was, to add to that, acutely aware that it wasn't my hair that was being singed at all, but rather it was my eye that was burning. That's also quite a discomforting experience, I have to admit. Once he finished up with the left eye, he did the same to my right eye. And once the procedure was over, it didn't last very long, to be honest, maybe about between 15 to 20 minutes. I didn't feel any pain because of the anesthetic that was administered, but I did feel discomfort. I felt a bit dizzy. I was a bit ill at ease. But I have to say, I was astounded at how I was able to see so well, so quickly. If you wear contact lenses, I'm sure you have experienced falling asleep with your contact lenses in and waking up the next day and thinking, my God, what sorcery is at play here? How am I cured? Before, of course, quickly realizing that you're not cured, that your eyes are full of gloop and potentially infected. But you know that elation that you feel when you do feel for a moment that you're cured? Well, you feel that elation, and it's protracted really for a couple of days. I honestly felt like I was in some kind of Marvel action movie and that I had some form of superpower bestowed upon me. What really stood out more than anything else was how I could see colors more richly. And that was a very beautiful experience, I have to say. It was quite cool, and that novelty didn't wear off for quite some time. It wasn't all rosy though. There were some complications. Once the anesthetic wore off, I did feel quite a lot of pain. My eyes were quite bloodshot for over a week. And the optometrist did not explain these side effects to me during our first consultation. She told me that I'd be able to go back to work immediately. And I did. And to be fair, I could go back to work immediately, but not in my regular state, so to say. I flew back to Brussels a couple of days after the procedure, and I had a fairly high-level meeting with some fairly high-level delegates. I'm aware that I'm tooting my own horn to a degree there by saying that, but I'm just trying to set the scene. I walked into the conference center, and because of the condition I was in, I had to wear a pair of aviator glasses. I don't know if you know what aviator glasses look like. They're something akin to these that I'm wearing now. No, they're not. These are aviator glasses. And I had to wear these into the conference center to meet my new team lead for the first time, working for a high-end client that I'd never worked for before. And you can imagine how much of an idiot I looked like walking into the conference center like this. The team lead obviously noticed this and approached me almost immediately, at which point I had to remove my glasses and reveal my extremely bloodshot eyes. I immediately explained, of course, that I had undergone surgery and that I wasn't up the night before indulging in vices or anything like that. She was relieved because she didn't hide her surprise at the sight of my eyes, so to say. So she was quite relieved to hear the explanation. Beyond the physical aspect, there's a psychological aspect to play as well when you undergo surgery of this nature. And there's something to be said for being able to choose when you want to see the world clearly, as much as you can, and when you don't. There was a bit of a comfort in being able to come home and take out my contact lenses whenever I wanted, and to kind of self-isolate really in your own little world, not being able to perceive your reality, your immediate reality, really, like everybody else can. And that in itself could be comforting sometimes. I remember back in the day, I had a girlfriend in Limerick, and she too was short-sighted. And we used to spend some days blissfully Monet. This basically entailed heading out to the coast, taking off our glasses and walking around forests and the Western Irish countryside, which is breathtaking. And it's also quite nice to see it as if it were a Monet painting, blurred and different. All that said, though, I must say that if you do have the opportunity, and if you can, I would absolutely recommend burning away your myopia, because all in all, it's pretty nifty to say that, as corny as this will sound, I was able to finally have 20/20 vision in the year 2020. Thank you very much.